Thank you very much, Ms. Ustyugova, for this interview. So first question is, IMF announced that forecast that in a report published in early April that Armenia would have 1.5% economic decline for this year, and you know, I'm sure that you know that Armenian government announced a couple days ago that Armenia would have 2% economic decline. So what is your assessment? Do you expect that Armenia would have the same economic decline like in 2009?
Thank you for inviting me to this interview. Listen, the current situation is highly uncertain and the crisis is truly unique, right? And we indeed project the economic contraction by 1.5% in 2020. This is broadly in line with the authorities' projections of -2. So we currently see as the pandemic as having a very sharp but also very short-lived impact on Armenia. So we expect the peak of the shock to happen around now, around the second quarter, with some slight recovery starting already in Q3 and the acceleration in economic activity in the fourth quarter to 2021. We also hope that the economic policy support measures announced by the authorities would help economic developments. As a result, we see the economic contraction at 1.5 in 2020, but already the recovery to about 4.8% in 2021. However, there are lots of risks to these projections, to the outlook, and the risks, I would say, are tilted to the downside.
What would be the consequences of prolonged COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown for Armenian economy? What do you think on this?
Well, like elsewhere, a more extensive and a more prolonged domestic COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown would lead to deeper contraction in 2020 that would delay both the time and the pace of recovery. And also, the outlook very much depends on what's happening in the region and globally, because the external demand is very important for the recovery of a small open economy like Armenia. So a more protracted pandemic at the global and regional level will further negatively affect Armenia and delay the recovery.
Several days ago, IMF announced that it's ready to provide 280 million credit for Armenian government, for Armenian economy. Is there any arrangement how Armenian government would borrow this money and what purpose?
Look, you may remember that almost 1 year ago, in May 2019, the IMF board approved a standby arrangement. It's an arrangement with Armenian authorities to provide financial assistance, financial help to Armenia if needed. So we have been monitoring the implementation of the program continuously since May 2019. We have also been conducting the reviews. So what happened 2 weeks ago, we concluded at the staff level a second review of this standby arrangement. And once this is approved by the board, which is currently scheduled for the second half of May, then about $280 million will become available for Armenia to borrow from the International Monetary Fund. This amount includes those money that were accumulated, so-called drawing rights that were accumulated by Armenia until now under the existing standby arrangement. Plus, the authorities have requested additional financial help from the International Monetary Fund to help pay for the economic support programs and necessary healthcare expenditures in the current environment. So 280 million will be available in the second half of May. The program itself will last until May 2022, and about $140 million additionally will be available after May 2020. Right now, the current these $280 million will be used as a disbursed as a direct budget support upon the approval by the IMF board, which means that the government would be able to use this money at its own discretion to finance the priority expenditure.
Yulia, do you expect that as a result of this crisis, Armenian state debt would increase sharply like in 2009? You know, I'm sure you know that several days ago, Armenian government announced that it's planning to borrow additional more than $500 million.
Right. So it's natural, and that the debt to GDP ratio will increase sharply in 2020. According to our projection and also the Ministry of Finance projection, the debt will exceed 60% of GDP at the end of 2020. And the financing needs are high. Like, it's natural that the government needs to borrow, because the priority right now is to finance healthcare expenditure and to protect both families and to protect the vulnerable but viable companies. The measures, even the measures that need to be taken right now will help avoid more painful and prolonged socio-economic damage in the future. But one needs to pay for those measures, and as a result, of course, the debt will temporarily increase. And this is the situation that we will see across all the countries around the world right now.
Do you think that Armenian government would be able to service this state debt?
Yes, it will. So the Armenian government considers this increase in the debt, the expected increase in the debt, as a temporary increase. And it plans to implement fiscal consolidation in the years ahead to gradually bring the debt to GDP level to more sustainable levels in line with the fiscal rule. So there is a plan.
How do you assess the Armenian government's anti-crisis response? Is there anything that you should or would like to advise to Armenian government?
Look, the anti-crisis response by the government was a swift one, right? And this is a good thing that the authorities quickly implemented the national state of emergency that helps limit the economic and humanitarian and social consequences, and it helps manage the pressure on the healthcare system. So we welcome such a swift response. We also welcome the package of economic policy measures that was announced by the authorities. It includes measures like lump sum transfers to the vulnerable families, direct support to the employees, and liquidity support to vulnerable but viable firms. And just looking globally, all countries are trying to do the same by using probably somewhat different sets of measures, but the goal is the same: to provide targeted and temporary support to those who need it the most in the current circumstances. So right now, I think the key is to implement those measures and to make sure that in the current situation, in a situation of a lockdown, when the uncertainty about the future is very high, the support reaches those who need it the most. And regarding what else we can recommend, and I think we would advise to start planning for the recovery. And in that situation, we would one way the government can start preparing for the recovery is to prepare a pipeline of public investment projects that are ready to go once the containment measures are eliminated.
Ms. Ustyugova, thank you very much for this interview.
Of course.